Hey, welcome to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a woman and a family who is new to me in my own studies of Tudor history. That is Anne Windsor. She then became Anne Dudley when she married Edmund Dudley. So, we're going to talk briefly about her today. If you are new here, very special, warm welcome to you. I am your host, Heather Tesco, and I have been podcasting on Tudor England since, 2009. And this is the place where I put all of my episodes from all of my podcasts, as well as lots of extra content like this video right here. Quick reminder, TudorCon happening in the countdown is happening. The countdown is going, I think it's like 18 days, something like that, September 8th through 10th. The tickets, of course, to come in person are closed now because I had to confirm numbers with caterers and stuff like that. But you can still come online via the streaming ticket, 3 days of Tudor immersion with talks and new friendships and entertainments. It's going to be so cool. So englandcast.com/TudorCon online to learn more about that. The cook along video, Cassidy Cash of That Shakespeare Girl, our I think her podcast is called That Shakespeare Life. She has a video. I don't even know the whole backstory on this. It's like Romeo and Juliet in 3 minutes, and it's won all kinds of awards. And she's putting together some special stuff just for streaming tickets. It's just like basically going to be this Tudor immersion weekend, and you can't miss it. Like you just can't miss it. It's englandcast.com/TudorCon online. And also 2 things. First, thanks to the comment on my video about Catherine Howard yesterday. That got a lot of comments for my videos. My videos don't normally get that many comments. So, something struck a nerve there. Maybe I'll continue to do these Heather Vents videos. I'll find things on Twitter that annoy me in the Tudor Twitter world. No, because I don't want to do that because that would require me actually spending time in Tudor Twitter. And I don't want to do that. Specific thank you to the mentions about Connor Bryn's work, which is a little bit more recent than Gareth Russell, who I had included in the video. So I appreciate that comment. I knew I had forgotten somebody. I was thinking about it. I was like, there's somebody else, and I couldn't remember who it was. So thank you. I'll put it in the description of the other video as well. And the second thing I want to say is thank you so much again to Teresa and also to Sani Janice for your recent super thanks. So here's something really weird about being a YouTuber, or I guess I don't think of myself as a YouTuber, but I guess in the context of what I'm doing right now, I am. So you get this little notification on your phone and it says, you can enable super thanks. And that's a way that your viewers can support you. And it's just one button and I go, okay, enable. It's like boop, 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 enable 5 minutes and it's done. And then randomly, certain days of the week, you wake up and there's these little notifications that say people gave you money. And it's like, what the heck? What kind of world do we live in? I am consistently amazed, that you guys are watching this because I'm just talking. I just like to talk and you guys are watching me talk. And then some of you send me money, which is crazy. I mean, it's amazing. And then a lot of you come to events I put on, like TudorCon, and then a lot of you buy my books like this or like the Tudor plan. I don't have a recent Tudor planner up here. The internet lets me do these cool things and you guys support it, and that's super awesome. So look, seriously, heartfelt thanks. I know I'm being kind of silly, but honestly, what kind of life how amazing is life? How amazing is this? It's super cool. So thank you, Teresa. To Sani Janice, thank you so much for making it possible for me to talk. And I just appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for watching. There's so many things pulling on your time. I get it. I go onto YouTube and there's 83 million videos I want to watch. It's surfing big waves in Hawaii. I want to watch that. Climbing K2. I want to watch that. New historical things. I want to watch. And it's who has the time? And you guys spend your time watching me. And I kind of don't get it. But thank you. Really. That's all I can say really is thank you. That's all I can say. So the internet's amazing. The internet lets me meet people like you. And and do cool things. Isn't it cool we all get to do cool things? So I'm grateful. Just super, super grateful. All right. So I made my desk shake again. Get into it. I am working on an upcoming podcast episode about the famous, infamous Empson and Dudley, Henry VII's advisors, who were so unpopular that one of the first moves that Henry VIII made as king was to execute them. And of course, in my reading, I come across Edmund Dudley's wife, Anne Windsor. Now, see, this was a little confusing to me because I always think of the Windsors as the current Windsors. And yeah, I know the story of how they took on their name because their old name sounded too Germanic. And um, so I didn't realize that there was like this whole crew of Windsors in the past. And in fact, Anne Windsor does not even have her own Wikipedia page, which maybe I should. I've never edited anything on Wikipedia. Maybe I should go on and add a page for her. When you Google her, all that comes up is the current Princess Anne. So I had to do quite a bit of digging to find out about this woman's life. And I first was reading about her. There's a book called The House of Dudley that came out recently, which is what I'm using to write this podcast episode that will come out soon. The person who wrote that talked about Anne, and that's where I first read about her. And I did a bit of digging on her and her family. And where you get most of your information is through genealogy pages, interestingly enough. She was only about 21 when she died as well, so there's not a lot of information. She didn't live enough of a life to be in the records many times, but she was married to one of the king's leading ministers. And she comes from a family that actually managed to survive through the Wars of the Roses, which is no small feat, right? So she was born about 1479. Her father, Thomas, was the constable of Windsor Castle. Thomas made a will in 1479 from which we get information about the family. And then in 1483, he was told to prepare for some knighthood honors that would be handed down during Edward V's coronation. Of course, that's when young Edward V was preparing to be crowned. And so Thomas Windsor was told to prepare for becoming a knight. He was going to be knighted at the honors that were given out during the coronation. But of course, that never happened because Richard III did name him constable of Windsor Castle, which seems to have been a hereditary job that his ancestors also had. Then in 1485, of course, Henry VII beats Richard III. It's August 22nd as I'm recording this, which, of course, is the Battle of Bosworth. It is also coincidentally the day I had my first date with my husband, August 27th, and it was my grandmother's birthday. So it's a big day. It's a big day in the life of Heather. So when Henry beat Richard, he stripped Thomas of all of his lands and honors, which was common because it was like the old king gave it to you, but then he immediately restored them. So that was nice. But unfortunately, Thomas died just a week after, so he never got to enjoy his new honors. His son Andrew, who was Anne's brother, inherited. We actually know a fair amount about Andrew Windsor, because he was a knight. He went on to go to France with Henry VIII in 1513. He was keeper of the wardrobe, which was a huge responsibility under Henry VIII. And he managed to live until the ripe old age of about 75, which no small feat. Again, no small feat for people who are in power around Henry VIII too, right? Seems like people in power, with the exception of Charles Brandon, don't live really long lives. Anyway, he wasn't in enough power, I guess. Back to Anne. She would have been about 6 when her father died. Her mother remarried a Sir Robert Lytton, who was himself keeper of the wardrobe under Henry VII, which, of course, is a position that puts you very close to the king. Anne was the youngest daughter, the last one to marry. And in his will, her father left her about 66 pounds. That was 100 marks for her dowry. It wasn't huge, but it was the equivalent to the salary of a skilled tradesman for like 3 or 4 years. So it was, a decent dowry, especially for the youngest daughter. But she did have a family that was growing in prominence and growing in their close relationship to the king. So that would have been attractive more so than her dowry, especially for a family who maybe had money but didn't have that influence. And for Edmund Dudley, that was good enough. Edmund Dudley was actually close friends with Andrew, who was Anne's brother, and the two had worked together throughout the 1490s to secure lands under the new Tudor monarch for both the Dudley clan and the Windsor clan in Sussex. And so the Windsor children were marrying into important families in Sussex. And Edmund himself had siblings that were making important marriages. So this little clique was building a power base. And Anne Windsor found herself married to Edmund Dudley. So Edmund and Anne married in 1494. She was about 15 years old. Her father in law, John Dudley, not the later John Dudley, but an earlier John Dudley, her father-in-law, he loved his daughter-in-law, Anne, and in his will, he left her gold, which he said she could use to make a chain in any style that she wanted. And then that chain would go to his granddaughter, her daughter, whom he called his little Elizabeth, Anne's daughter. Elizabeth was born around 1500, and she herself went on to live until about 1560. Sadly, one of the most famous things that she is famous for is for having an unhappy marriage. So her husband, William, had an affair with Agnes Rice. Agnes Rice was the daughter of Rhys ap Gruffydd and the granddaughter of Thomas Howard, 2nd Duke of Norfolk. It created a huge scandal when William, who was the husband of Elizabeth Windsor, William had an affair with this Agnes Rice. He actually brought Agnes to live in his house, kicked his wife out, and at his death, he gave most of his land and his property to Agnes, which resulted in years of litigation and contesting the will because Elizabeth's son, their heir, Charles, their legitimate heir, would have been Anne Windsor's grandson. They had quarreled bitterly. Charles had called his father a false hypocrite who belonged in prison. So it turned into a big mess contesting this land, and it cost a lot of money on both sides. And William and Agnes had one daughter who was illegitimate, also called Agnes. So sadly, that is what Anne Windsor's daughter, Elizabeth, is most known for. So Anne marries Edmund in 1494. It's interesting that they didn't have any children for 6 years. It's possible that at the time Edmund was building up his career, maybe they weren't living together. I can't find any records of what was happening during that time. So if you know of any, please leave a comment. I would love to know. But they did have little Elizabeth in 1500, and Anne died shortly thereafter. The thing is, I'm not sure how she died, if she died in childbirth. I think that she probably didn't die directly in childbirth because there's that record of her father-in-law, John, calling her daughter his little Elizabeth. John had died, and in his will, he left the gold chain to Anne, implying that she was still alive at the time that he died. So he had enough time to meet Elizabeth and call her his little Elizabeth, and then leave the gold to Anne in his will. So I think she probably hadn't died directly in childbirth, but at the same time, after Edmund Dudley remarried, there's records of his second wife at the time saying that she was worried she would go the way of Edmund's first wife when she was pregnant. So maybe Anne had something happen like what happened with Jane Seymour, where she was well and then things took a turn, or maybe she just got sick and her body was still quite weak, recovering from childbirth. It can take a while, and maybe she wasn't fully healed yet, and that's how she died. But either way, she died in 1500, had a pretty grand funeral that all the local gentry, all the important people showed up in a church where her father-in-law had donated altar cloth for his funeral when he had died as well. So there you go. That's Anne Windsor. She died about 21. Not a lot to say about her, but she's one of these people who was skirting around on the outside of power, yet she would have seen a lot. She would have seen her father surviving the Wars of the Roses, being stripped of honors and then re-given the honors, and then her stepfather being quite close to the new king. It was an interesting life that she lived for the short amount of time that she lived it. So there you go, a little bit about Anne Windsor, a person that I did not know existed, but I feel like my life is a little bit fuller now that I do know of her existence. Thank you for watching. Like I said, you've got so many videos you could watch. There are so many. And you chose to watch this one. And I don't take that for granted. I hope that I have earned your subscription to my channel where I put out content like this almost every day. I hope you press that like button because it feeds the algorithm. And who doesn't want their YouTube algorithm Tudorfied, huh? Gotta feed that algorithm. Um, you are deeply loved and appreciated. I appreciate you. I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to drink your water. It's a hot one out there. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will be back tomorrow.